The two official languages of Malta are Maltese and English. Maltese is also the national language, so it has a special status, if you like, obviously. And that is the case because actually some recent research shows that about over 90% of Maltese claim they use Maltese at home and in their daily life, especially in spoken language. Because again, there's a difference between the spoken language and the written language in the sense that there is a tendency for people to write in English but to speak in Maltese. There are a few people who speak mainly English and not so much Maltese, and there are lots who speak mainly Maltese with different varieties of English and different levels of English and proficiency in English. Okay? And again, a lot depends usually on the situation and the context in which you're talking. So you might talk English in a certain context, say with friends who themselves do not speak so much Maltese, but then you talk Maltese in another context. Okay, but this can be actually something like, imagine in a government office, for example, okay, or as a university, or during a lecture. Lectures, for example, are usually in English because there are lots of foreign students. It tends to be the language you use, perhaps, in more formal situations. But even that is an overgeneralization. It is, as I said, pretty complex on the whole.
In education, I think there's a little bit more of an onus on using English, especially, as Ray said, in the written mode. So a lot of people will make a choice to write in English even if they would normally speak Maltese. So it's quite a complex situation, and people are bilingual. I would say most people are bilingual to different degrees, and it can be a lot of Maltese and only a little English, but even people who don't use Maltese regularly will be doing knitting of a knitting pattern in English because certain material is not available in Maltese. Partly that's one of the reasons. So we don't have many magazines in Maltese. There was an attempt even with exams like at the baccalaureate level to give students a choice of writing an exam answers in English or Maltese. And the tendency was for students to opt for English rather than Maltese, because the written mode, I think still there is English dominates in the written mode, not in the speaking, but in the written mode. I think there's still a bit of a dominance.
We do get a lot of Italian television, and well, it's up to about 30-40 years ago. We only had Italian television, so there was a generation of people who were exposed to Italian a lot, but mostly passively. They could understand the language but not necessarily use it. It's changing slightly now because a lot of young people now, because of cable television, tend to watch more English-speaking programs, except for example in football or something like that, which then if you've got Italian fans, they watch Italian football and they get exposed to Italian. So again, it's pretty mixed in that sense. Okay. Of course, ideally, we would like everybody to be a balanced bilingual, to be proficient in both English and Maltese in particular. But that's very much an ideal. You will always find that one language tends to dominate over the other.
Also, I think what's happened since Malta joined the European Union, and so Maltese became an official language of the EU, which then meant that there's a large number of documents. Maltese people in Brussels and Luxembourg are engaged in translating documents which before nobody would ever have thought of translate. We didn't have a culture of translation. If a document was available in a language we had access to, we just wouldn't translate it. What was the point? Whereas the European Union and the fact that Maltese is an official language, more importantly, has created something which actually didn't happen before. And so some of the registers which were neglected, say pharmaceuticals, and that was a register which was typically English, and nobody would ever have dreamt of doing translation there. Whereas if you get a document, if a translator at the European Commission gets a document about some issue to dealing with pharmaceuticals, they have to translate it into Maltese. So the terminologies has had to start being created since Maltese became an official language of the EU. And I think that is, over time, it's kind of giving Maltese a bit more status, a bit more in people's mind. It is maybe no longer like the language of the the poor, of the uneducated. It is now a language which has status as well. I think that the ideal for a country like Malta, which is tiny, is that our heritage should be a heritage of bilingualism, and what we should be giving our children is the possibility of growing up with a minimum of 2 languages, which for us was always a reality, because we always had invaders coming to Malta who didn't speak English who didn't speak Maltese but spoke another language. So our heritage is one where we've always had bilingualism, maybe even multilingualism, and now we have also the additional, I think, push to the Maltese language, which, however, won't let Maltese be the less important of the 2, but it has status without, however, losing the bilingualism, which I think we should keep.